we are making progress, as bad as the news looks if all you were doing was watching cable TV all day long. Yes, the crisis that hit towards the end of my first campaign hit us all really badly. 2007, 2008, that was rough. But today, our businesses have added nearly 10 million new jobs over the past 52 months. Construction and housing are rebounding. Our auto industry is booming. Manufacturing's adding jobs for the first time since the 90s. The unemployment rate has fallen to its lowest point since September of 2008, the fastest one-year drop in nearly 30 years. And look, most of this is attributable to you, the American people.
The wild ride on Wall Street continues. The Dow Jones every day reaching new and unheard of heights, and the American economy is the strongest it has ever been, and it's because of the Obama administration policies. They alone have been the reason for this incredible stratospheric run of prosperity. Okay. Everyone take a breath here. That is, of course, one take on what we have seen in recent weeks and months. Now, as we do every day here on MidPoint, the truth. Welcome in the chairman of the Society to Advance Financial Education, Steve Beaman, joins us on the show. Steve, pleasure to see you again.
Well, it's always wonderful to be on with you and your audience.
Steve, here we go. First 2,000 days of Barack Obama. How has the president done? And the president and the administration will tell us in these first 2,000 days, we did it for you, America. All right, hit us with the reality.
I think we have to look at several things. First of all, the economy had so tanked in 2008 and 9, it was bound to come back a little bit. And I think for that catalyst, we can, thank the Federal Reserve, frankly. They've kept interest rates at all-time lows for many years now, much to the surprise of most of the folks on the inside. And that has helped stimulate a stock market, which has kept people feeling like their retirement may be intact. But if we look at the economy in general, we look no further than the first quarter of this year that saw negative growth. So I think it's a little bit disingenuous for any administration to claim success in the market when in reality the economy is in transition.
Steve, give us a little bit of an explanation here on the disconnect, because every time the stock market hits a new ceiling, you will hear a number of people go, the economy's doing great. It must be doing great, because if it wasn't, the stock market would not be hitting 350,000 at this point or wherever they're heading at this point. Give us a little dose of real here.
Well, Ed, I'm glad you bring it up, and I think there's a reality here for folks to realize that stocks are priced based on many things, but one of the core things is competition in the marketplace. With interest rates so low, people don't want to go out and buy bonds. So what happens is all that money floods into dividend-paying stocks and into stocks trying to capture some semblance of a return. And for that, that's not the administration, it's not Congress, it's the Federal Reserve. The other thing to realize is that the big multinational companies are doing quite well. The J.P. Morgans of the world, the big banks are doing very well, and they're using that newfound earnings power to buy back their own stock, which is also causing stock prices to rise. So we have externalities to the market that are driving it up, not necessarily the policies of the administration.
All right, here comes a line that a good friend of mine told me this week. He said, look, if people didn't have money to spend, then they wouldn't be buying stocks, and that wouldn't mean that the economy is on great footing.
Well, I think he's somewhat right, but somewhat wrong as well. People in general aren't throwing a lot of new volume into the market. It's coming out of retirement plans, which by their nature are locked up and have to go somewhere. And if you look at consumer spending patterns, yes, we've seen a little bit of a rebound here in the second quarter, but they were very flat in the first quarter. And so I think, again, we have to be cautious. We look at like the unemployment rate. We say, wow, it's come down. We have to understand that that number is suspect. It's gamed by the administration, and this is all administrations. The better number is the labor participation rate, which actually Janet Yellen brought up yesterday, looking at it at its lowest point since the 70s. So the economy is stagnant. We're trying to see some growth. We've had it for a couple of years, but we certainly aren't booming, as some of these people would like to say.
All right, you just used a phrase here that I want you to just expound on a little bit for people here. You used the phrase labor participation rate, which I think is what a lot of people miss when they're talking about the economy. Give us a little in-depth on that as to what that is and why that is so important.
Well, if we look at the economy, if you look at unemployment as a ratio, it's looking at the percent of people that are receiving unemployment compensation. Once you fall off of that, you fall off the unemployment level. The labor participation rate looks at the number of people relative to the total labor force that are participating in the economy. And that number is frightfully low. And that reflects the 25% unemployment among young people, the 50% unemployment among young African Americans, and an overall total unemployment of about 15%.
Well, Obama does, and let's be honest here. We try to do that here. We play both sides here and make sure that everybody gets what is right and what is wrong here. Obama does rank third behind Clinton and Roosevelt in terms of stock gains. So it is fair to say that he's done some things to strengthen the economy. What have those been? A couple of keys.
Well, his policies have been very good for the big banks. They've made a lot of money. And it's been very good for some of the multinational companies, the General Electrics of the world. They've done quite well. But the core driver behind this stock market has not been the administration. It's been the Federal Reserve. And frankly, that's true amongst most administrations. It's the Federal Reserve's policies on liquidity that drive a lot of the underlying movement in the market.
So then what does the Fed do next? I think everybody is watching. Every time Janet Yellen shows up for any sort of an appearance, you all of a sudden have people put on double secret alert because they're waiting for something to happen and something miraculous to happen with the economy. Yellen appeared this week, not really much. It didn't really excite a lot of people. So where does the Fed go from here?
Well, the speculation is that not wanting to really put this economy, which is on the fringe of going down, they don't want to push it over the edge. So they're going to keep rates low. They must begin at some point moving them up a little bit. And I think Janet Yellen and the other governors are trying very diligently to find out how they can do that softly without the interest rates spiking up. And that they're afraid of because it could drive us right back into recession.
So what could be a couple of ideas then to do that?
Oh, I think they will slow down and pare back the stimulus they've had of buying these government bonds. And that in and of itself will cause a little bit more normality in the markets. But that's the number one. They don't want to take rates up. So I think you can look for them to slow down the quantitative easing over the next months.
All right, we talked about what the president has done on the positive side. In your opinion, then what has he done on the negative side to keep the stock market going up, but everything else going down?
Well, clearly the debts have gone up from the United States. Now, on his positive there, the deficits come down from over $1 trillion to $500 billion this year, and that's good for stocks. But if you look generally speaking, the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, you could love that legislation or hate it, but it created instability in the economy, and instability is bad when you're trying to have an economy that recovers. Secondly, the additional regulation from the EPA and the coal industry and others has really slowed those industries down. So there's been a mixed bag out of the administration. I think on par, you can look at the economy and say we're not really growing, so they must not be the best policies. And this market is not attributable so much to him, but to the Fed.
Well, you talked about, I want to go back, you said, you reminded us again in 2008 and 2009 when things tanked here. And one of the things that we are continuing to hear from Democrats is, hey, the deficit's down, it has to be good. How do those two, because I know there has to be a correlation here between the massive tank that went on and the deficit being down. There's got to be something in here that we're missing that maybe they're taking credit for that isn't entirely their credit.
Well, clearly, when the market came down in 2008 and 9, it hit an emotional low in the early 2009 period. There is a natural regression to the mean of stocks. So they rose just by their very nature over the subsequent years back up to the 14,000 level. That generates extra revenue for the government because they take capital gains taxes on that. In addition, as I said, corporate profits are actually improving. So they're bringing in more corporate revenues than they have. And that's helped raise the income to the government. All the while, they've been under the sequester program that was put in place several years ago, and they've been cutting military spending on a relative scale, and that's caused the deficit to decline.
Here's something that always grabs people. Stocks, for whatever reason, under Democrats, generally do better. Why is that?
Well, I think we need to be careful with any assignment here. If we look in the 1990s when the market did so well, it was a function of a couple of things. First, technology that came of life, and that caused a great deal of explosive behavior in the market. And secondly, we had a Democratic president, but we had a Republican House, and them working together gave us a balanced budget. So I think it's difficult to say, positive or negative, that any president has that much effect over the market.
Fair to say, though, that you just mentioned the Congress. That Congress and the president, whatever administration is in there, they have to learn to get along somewhere on some of these economic policies because the stock market can go 18,000, 19,000, and we can still have a very stagnant economy if they don't get together and solve a couple of key issues.
Or you could see the contrary. The market dropped back down to 14,000 real quick. So I do agree. And if you look back at successful presidencies of Ronald Reagan, who worked so closely with Tip O'Neill, of Bill Clinton, who worked with Newt Gingrich, it would be nice to see this administration reach out to the House and try to build a relationship there so they could move forward on some budgets that make sense rather than this random thing we've had going for 4 years now.
All right, Steve, you sit here and you financially educate people. Would you tell them to play the stock market now?
I would tell them that if they look at valuation, and fundamentals always matter, this market is trading right now at about 27 times earnings. If you look at an adjusted earnings, that's a little bit scary to me. So I would be cautious. I would be looking at dividend-paying stocks as some protection, and I would be looking to make more liquidity in my portfolio so that if the market does adjust to that valuation, I won't get hurt.
I'm calling you after the show to make sure that I know everything that's going on here before I do anything. I trust you on that.
It's always my pleasure.
Steve, thanks so much for joining us, my friend. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
All right, you now have had your financial education for the day, all right? Next up, a pastor showing his true love for his flock and anyone else who might ask about it, along with the fan who takes the game too seriously. Your ticket to Outland is punched and ready to go on MidPoint.